Hello, Dr. Smith. Thank you for joining me today. Um, my name is Lee Phillips. I'm with MB Safe, Manhattan Beach Safe Alternatives for Everyone. Today, I'll be speaking with Dr. Irene Smith. She's a lawyer and a psychologist. Um, I thought I'd invite her to speak today because she has an interesting view on homelessness and some interesting solutions. So let's open it up. Dr. Smith, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Please call me Irene.
Okay.
Um, and I do have an eclectic background.
Okay.
I have a background in psychology where I worked at a locked facility
Mhm.
in an actual hospital for children who had severe mental illness. I see a lot of that on the street in San Jose right now.
Mhm.
So it's unfortunately a familiar situation. I also worked at IBM for about 18 years, mostly in finance. And I've also been a pro tem judge for the past 15 years. I've heard over 2,000 cases, and I'm also an administrative hearing officer for Santa Clara County. So it gives me a different perspective as I also own a small business that's really been impacted by the homelessness that we're experiencing in downtown San Jose in particular. Um, Downtown San Jose has more unhoused folks than any other part of San Jose and
Mhm.
any other part of Santa Clara County. So we
So,
are really impacted.
so Irene, how many homeless are there are you in the city of San Jose? How many
Yeah.
um, homeless are there? And can you describe them? Are they males, families, women escaping domestic violence?
Yeah, we have everything. As you probably know, homelessness comes in all sorts of shapes and sizes.
Hmm.
Some that you can see and some that you can't. The ones that are most visible, that are getting the most attention right now because they are very disruptive, are the
Hmm.
ones that are living on the streets and living on the creeks and on the sidewalks. And I would say they are mostly male,
Hmm.
and but we have plenty of families. We have plenty of families living in RVs on the sidewalks. I don't see many families living in tents on the sidewalks, but there are some encampments that are a little bit larger where there are some families. But I think that what's hidden from view are the couch surfers and a lot of families that they'll try and combine, and they really are unhoused. And again, the impact right now is with the folks that are living on the streets and the encampments. And from my perspective, I think that we have three reasons that we're here today.
Hmm.
Um, the first one being a strategy that San Jose implemented in about 2011, and it's called Housing First.
Okay.
It's a strategy that really was nationwide, and California really took a hold of it. But San Jose took it to a new level starting in 2011. Of course, Housing First started before that.
So
But
Irene,
mhm,
for our listeners, can you explain what is housing first?
yep. So in the 70s and 80s, psychologists like myself would try and help folks who were unhoused. And we would go to the creek sides and try and help. But we realized pretty quickly, but unfortunately not quickly enough, that those folks didn't have showers, they didn't have a mailbox, they couldn't receive an application for work, they couldn't have any kind of clothing to get them to work. So the pendulum swung very dramatically from trying to reach them with services where they were at to bringing them to housing. And the mentality for Housing First is very, very narrow. It only focuses on housing, and housing is the only solution. Right now in San Jose, we are building an 80 unit structure for affordable housing for permanent supportive housing, which is folks who've been chronically homeless. And that's to the tune of 1.1 million. That is a new high.
Hmm.
And that's 1.1 million per apartment per door.
Hmm.
And that number is jaw-dropping, but it is not as jaw-dropping as the variable costs that will be ensuing. It doesn't include the rent of the land. It doesn't include property management or property maintenance or any kind of necessary services. It doesn't include any utilities. So there are so many variable costs with managing and running an apartment building that we're not even being told about. And the new level of 1.1 is atrocious. But with the housing first, they're saying these organizations only want housing. And because it takes us anywhere between 4 to 10 years to build a structure, to find the land and build it up, and find the money to build it, we are leaving so many people on the street, on the sidewalks, and on the creek sides. And I think a lot of these organizations are just fine with that because their whole focus is building. And if we don't build, they don't want to hear about it. And the people who are living on the sidewalks really amplify their call to action for more housing because it becomes very visible. And so people, have a heartbreak and say, we must be doing something. And their response is, we must build. And I'm saying, no, that's not necessarily the case. We don't have to build. And we're very quickly in Santa Clara County, we have well over 10,000 unhoused folks. That's nothing compared to LA, I understand, but it's a lot for us. We're smaller, and we will not have enough money to build a structure at 1.1 million per door, plus variable costs for upkeep. So we're going to quickly run out of money, and we're going to need a different solution.
So, are these 10,000, you gave us, some are men, some are families, some are couch surfing. Are these all people who were in San Jose and became homeless because of rising house costs? Or how do you think most of these people became homeless?
I think the reasons are as varied as you could possibly imagine. And in that couch surfing and the categories are quite broad. We have students as they state, God bless them. They are studying at the university level in their cars.
Okay.
So we have such a wide variety of unhoused folks. And how did we get here? I think one is the mentality of housing first, and then also the ones that are most visible on the street. I think there've been some really good articles in the Atlantic regarding new types of meth that are out there. We used to have meth that was developed primarily from Sudafed, and the Fed came in and started to regulate that. So people transferred their production of meth into other venues and means of production. And so now we're getting meth from China and Brazil and any country you could possibly think of that can put a bunch of chemicals together and give it to somebody. The problem is when we were manufacturing it from Sudafed, it took you anywhere between 3 to 6 years to really develop some sort of psychosis and permanent brain damage. Now, when we're dealing with the current level of meth, you can have a psychosis within 1 or 2 uses. And we're seeing that on the streets. The trees is tweaking, and it's really unfortunate. These folks are trapped in an uncomfortable level of addiction, and no one is willing to help unless we deal with the housing first mentality. And I say, no, we don't have to just do that. We can help the folks that are living on the street. And that kind of brings me to my third point about how we've gotten here. And that's Martin v. Boise. You had brought that up before. And Martin.
For our audience, can you explain Martin versus Boise and how that impacts what we see on the streets today and the interpretation of it? What's your interpretation of Martin versus Boise?
So Martin v. Boise is a Ninth Circuit District Court decision that covers the Western states from Arizona to California, to Montana, to Alaska, Hawaii. So it covers all those states, and it's the governing law, unless it goes to the Supreme Court, and then it gets reversed. But it was declined by the Supreme Court. So this is the rule of the land for these states. And what it says is that you cannot criminalize homelessness behavior. And that sounds really good. We don't want to criminalize somebody for being homeless.
Mhm.
but it's gotten expanded to the point that it's causing a human health crisis for both the people who are unhoused and for the people who are housed. There is no safe space. And what that
Oh,
means is it started originally with somebody who was sleeping on a bench and they were asked to move. And they said, no, that you can't criminalize that behavior unless you have enough beds.
mhm,
So the bottom line is, if we were able to provide enough beds, enough shelter for the 10,000 unhoused folks in Santa Clara County, we could then enforce our no camping laws, our no fire laws,
mhm.
our no urinating on the sidewalks or using, business thresholds as toilets. We could enforce a wide variety of laws that we can't right now because we're not providing those beds. There's been some misinterpretation. You mentioned before about what is my interpretation.
Mhm.
Some folks think that you have to require a structure, and that works really well with the housing first mentality. But if you look at the en banc decision, which is the second case, the court really clearly defines a structure housing as not having a traditional roof. That's not required. So you don't need a tiny home. You don't need a permanent supportive housing structure. What you could use is something that I recommend in the incremental ladder of housing success. You
Mhm.
can look it up online. It's something called a sprung structure. And it's a huge tent-like structure. It's relatively inexpensive, and
Mhm.
you can provide a lot of support within that structure itself for folks that are living on the street. And it's an incrementally better step than where they are right now.
Mhm. So with I know a few cities, Culver City in particular, is providing safe camping sites. Would that be adequate for the Boise decision?
It could be,
Okay.
Huntington Beach is doing something similar with sprung structures.
Mhm.
I believe Los Angeles is also doing something. Los Angeles County is in big trouble right now because the citizens have gotten together to sue the county to
Okay.
actually the county comply with Martin v. Boise.
Mhm.
So that's a very interesting case to follow. The I think that as long as you are providing a bed with a shelter that is safe, that will meet the court's criteria.
Mhm.
And a lot of folks will not want to go. But once you provide that shelter, you can enforce your no camping laws.
Mhm. So without giving your exact location, you're in San Jose and you're in the downtown area.
I'm
Can you
in
give
downtown.
can you give us a little bit of what you're seeing downtown? You mentioned fires. Are there encampments, tents? Can you give us a little bit of
Yep.
a picture of what you're seeing?
I do travel to Southern California. Frequently, I've sent my husband down there to look
Mhm.
at some of the sprung structures that are
Oh,
being used there.
okay.
Um, and I've gone through Culver City
Mhm.
and I see the underpasses where you're driving and you have sidewalks just completely covered with tents. We have very similar situations, but I think you
Okay.
have people. What I haven't seen that you guys haven't seen down there that we have a lot of people, I would say, just dancing in the middle of the street. We have a street called Santa Clara Street, and it's a 4-lane street.
Mhm.
Um, Pretty busy, lots of lights. It goes right through downtown core. And we have folks who are unhoused and unwell in the middle of the street. Either sometimes you see them spinning, just twirling. Many times, I can't even tell you how many times I've seen them without pants on. These are people that are clearly not capable of making the right choice of
Mhm.
how to take care of themselves, and they're
Mhm.
having a big impact. Sometimes on Santa Clara Street, I really hope and pray, please don't let me hit somebody,
Okay.
because you just don't know when one of them is going to just jump out in front of you, and it's happened.
Okay.
We stop at stoplights and stop signs, and people actually knock on your windows and try
Mhm.
your doors to
Yeah.
try and get.
Oh. Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
um,
Wow.
yeah.
And and,
Um,
and you did
it-
mention fires before when we talked previously, fires and some of the health impacts of the fires
Yep.
that are occurring.
We have daily fires from multiple encampments that are very close to my house.
Mhm.
So on the map here is a picture of downtown, and I'm mapping out encampments and areas. But when I go and visit, or when I try and clean up, there's a big cleanup on Saturday that I'll be
Mhm.
participating in. You know, it takes us maybe 12 of us, 4 hours. We can clear out 2 tons of garbage, and a lot of that is stuff that's been set on fire. And the
Okay.
fires happen for a variety of reasons. The majority of people think, oh, the fire is to keep them warm, keep them safe,
Mhm.
allow them to cook. But when I go down there, I'm here to tell you it is not about cooking or warmth. It is about aggression,
Mhm.
where they set their own stuff on the other people's stuff on fire. So if they're having an argument
Mhm.
with a neighbor in a tent, they'll go over and set that person's things on fire. It also seems to be compulsive, almost an entertainment
Oh.
type of process, where I've gone and I've seen piles of sneakers, just sneakers, that are probably 6 feet long and
Mhm.
were 4 feet high, and they set those on fire.
Okay.
Um, they disembowel computers, and they set the computer parts on fire to get certain things from them.
Uh-huh.
I've seen huge tire fires.
Okay.
Um, so this air is exceptionally toxic. This
Mhm.
plastic, rubber, chemical fire is very toxic. And in fact, Stanford has done 2 studies now on these types of fires that demonstrate that children who are exposed to these fires experience permanent and irreversible IQ damage. So I know a lot of people think, oh, these fires are only in downtown San Jose, but I got to tell you, this air travels, and just because you can't
Okay.
smell it doesn't mean that you're not breathing it.
Mhm.
And there are times when the smoke is so bad inside my house, I
Mhm.
have actually worn an N95 mask to sleep.
Oh,
And
really?
yeah, I mean, and there's no one to call. The our police staff is so shorthanded that they can only respond if somebody's life is in danger.
Okay.
Um, and the fire department is busy putting fires out. And if you just call and say, I smell smoke, it's really not enough. I've taken a whole group. We organized a bunch of moms, and
Mhm.
we started a group called the Defenders of Clean Air Equality,
Okay.
because we wanted to make sure that everybody knew that the children were suffering. And we went to the district attorney and asked for them to enforce the no fire laws. We went to the Bay Area Air Quality Management Board,
Mhm.
no response. Santa Clara County gets an F, a failing grade, from the American Lung Association.
Mhm.
And it doesn't seem to be that a priority at all. So
Mhm.
it has this unhoused situation has a
Mhm.
real dramatic impact on everyone who lives in or near San Jose. And
Mhm.
it is a public health crisis that we're not addressing. We don't want to deal with it because we're still confused as to how to deal with Martin v. Boise.
So, um, do you feel that you bring up a good point? Do you feel that there's confusion with Martin versus Boise? Or do you feel that people don't want to solve the problem, or they don't want to solve it with just shelters? They want to solve it with housing. I speak to a lot of people every day, average people. I think you're above average, but average. And you have a solution, and I have a solution, and a lot of people have solutions. Why doesn't the government have a solution, you think?
I think that there are so many self-interests
Mhm.
involved in homelessness. They call it the homeless industrial complex.
Mhm.
You have, the sheriff from, oh, what's the place next? Venice Beach, right?
Oh, yeah.
He's had it up to here, right? So he's been trying to do things to make improvements to Venice Beach, because it's a nightmare. I used to run there,
Mhm.
and yeah, it's just, So I think that we see a lot of conflicting organizations that have self-interests that are very loud. You know,
Mhm,
there's special interests. There are a lot of nonprofits, and
mhm,
they're benefiting from this housing first methodology because they're
mhm.
getting money. I see are these nonprofits that are designed to help folks who are homeless, but then they realize what a great business model that is, and then they subdivide and create themselves as a developer
Okay,
company. So when the city or the county or the state goes to the nonprofit and says, can you, handle this, this group of people, and they say yes, and oh, by the way, we can also build it for you with the other arm, our sister organization that we've created just for this type of situation. So it's this constant rolling. And so if we ever solve the homeless issue, I think there'll be a lot of people out of work, but maybe that means we'll be able to be more creative and elevate society. But
yeah.
until everybody starts to recognize these special interests, I think that we're still going to be a lot lost, and you and I will continue to push solutions until someone hears us. I mean, I think we are making progress. I mean, Las Vegas has the largest sprung structure of any location.
Mhm,
And I talked to the lead guy that was there, and he thought it was both the best thing he's ever done and the worst thing he's ever done, because
mhm,
it was very hard to do. It's not easy to ask and tell people to move, and that a lot of people don't want to hear that they need to get help. So
mhm,
he said it was really hard to do, but it was the best thing to do. And I think that he's learned a lot, and he can share that and has shared it with me.
mhm.
And I think that we can improve on that solution. With the incremental ladder of housing success, we use a sprung structure tent type structure. And we have, water and electricity, and every person is given a 12 by 12 space for their belongings and
Mhm.
their own private tent for their private space. And they can bring their animals, and they can get food, and they can also get the services that they need, that addiction help, that mental health help, and hopefully job training. And then very quickly we can start moving people out into permanent supportive housing or into tiny homes or actual apartments. But it
Mhm.
has to be some sort of gradual transition. We can't just plop somebody here and plop somebody there. I think that they need a lot more assistance than just putting the housing out there. We have a lot of permanent supportive housing in downtown San Jose, and I can tell you, you know, 2 months ago, we had a guy set a mattress on fire.
Mhm.
The nonprofit organization came forward and said, hey, good news, it really only damaged one apartment. We were able to contain the fire and the water damage. And we're all thinking, okay, well, that one apartment was over $1 million.
That's not
So,
repairs, yeah.
yeah.
So, can you explain your ladder of housing success? So if somebody's on the street in a tent, what steps would they take, versus somebody maybe on a couch or in a car? How does that work for different people?
It could work for people on a couch or on in an RV, because there could
Mhm,
be locations for the RVs,
mhm.
but it's centered around services. And in psychology, we like to focus on meeting the client where they're at.
Okay.
Right now, a good majority of them are intense.
Mhm,
And so it is not inhumane to take somebody from a tent who's sliding down a muddy creek and trying to
mhm,
be evacuated from the floods
mhm.
and keep them in a tent, but then provide additional shelter from the weather,
Okay.
provide the food and cafeteria that they need,
Mhm,
and then make sure that they're getting the mental health care, the addiction services
mhm.
that they need, that they can transition into work services and be more self-reliant and independent rather
So,
than, yeah, go
so
ahead.
many people are resistant to going to these, I would call it a sprung structure because there's probably rules.
Mhm.
How do you account for people not wanting to follow rules? Maybe
Right. I think that
behavior
there
rules or drug
are,
use. Mhm,
yeah, I think that there are two options. Certainly there will be rules.
mhm,
Absolutely.
mhm,
That's not a question. But I think that you don't have to force people to go, but you do have to enforce your laws.
Okay.
And so here in San Jose, my focus has been, hey, you don't have to stay at the sprung structure.
Mhm.
But if you want stuff, if you want a tent, if
Mhm.
you want a mattress, if you want a TV, if you want some books and bookshelves, if you want those things, they have to be at the sprung structure.
Mhm.
You can come and go as much as you want. You can come visit them. You don't have to stay there. You can leave and not come back, and we'll give you notice as to how long we can keep your stuff.
Mhm.
But the trick is we can't allow that stuff to be left in the public restrooms,
Mhm.
in the libraries, on
Mhm.
the sidewalks, falling into the creeks, and being the incendiary devices for the fires that we see.
Okay.
So I think that's a good motivation to say,
Mhm.
okay, okay, my stuff is there. So maybe they start just visiting their stuff and they become
Mhm.
more acquainted with it, and
Mhm.
they stay there to sleep.
Mhm.
Um, and then maybe they stay there a little bit longer and they get curious about the services. So I
Mhm.
think it's a gradual transition, and you don't force people to stay. It's not a prison. It's just
Okay.
not.
Okay.
But stuff has to stay.
And do you enforce the laws at the same time?
Yes.
Anti-camping laws and
Yep. Yep.
okay.
Once we meet the criteria for Martin v. Boise, we
Mhm.
absolutely enforce the laws. If there's a no camping law on the books, if there's a no camping law by schools
Mhm.
or by creeks or
Mhm.
protected areas, we actively enforce that, and then
Mhm.
that enables the police to do it, because right now they can't.
So I think that would definitely work for people who are mentally competent, but there are many people out there who aren't mentally competent, and how would you help them?
Well, I think a lot of we just, unfortunately, you guys have had Laura's Law for a
Mhm.
while.
Mhm.
Uh, we just recently passed Laura.
Okay.
So we in Santa Clara County have been delaying, postponing Laura's Law for what, 20 years at
It's
least?
been a while, yeah. Mhm.
So, and Laura's Law is really it's like a feather, right? It's
Mhm.
outpatient treatment, and you have
Mhm.
to meet this long list of 10 criteria in order to qualify.
Mhm.
So it's hardly anything at all, but at
Mhm.
least we have that tool.
Mhm.
Um, a lot of us are looking forward to Newsom's Care Court,
Okay.
and the first pilot will be implemented. I know San Francisco will be part of the pilot. I can't remember if parts of LA are or not, but San Francisco will be. And
Okay.
what I tell people in San Jose, because we're about 40 miles south,
Mhm.
if 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 Care Court gets implemented and in San Francisco and not in San Jose, we will have folks that come from San Francisco to San Jose because we don't have Care Court, because
Okay.
there are people, because to really understand mental illness, if somebody can't make a decision about wearing pants,
Mhm.
they're not going to be capable about making decisions about their mental health and what's best for them.
Mhm.
Somebody else has to make that decision for them, and they
Mhm.
will be resistive, right? They
Yep.
want independence, even though it's unhealthy for them,
Mhm.
potentially dangerous for them, and certainly dangerous for people around them. So this is where Care Court will really help.
Mhm.
It's a little bit far off, but that is going to be the hope.
Mhm. So, one final question. If there are other people or other residents, maybe in other cities, what would you tell them to do if they wanted to do something regarding homelessness?
We all have to get together
Mhm.
and provide enough shelter beds to meet Martin v. Boise. And
Okay.
I'm telling you, the first city in California that does that
Mhm.
um, is is gonna have the winning ticket,
Okay.
because the people who you talk about are either the people that I would refer to are resistant to going into shelters just because they don't like rules,
Mhm.
not the mentally ill folks, but those folks, the ones who have cognitive ability and are able to make a decision and vote with their feet. Those people will move from an area that meets Martin v. Boise.
Okay, they will. They will.
So it behooves every city to
Mhm.
start implementing a schedule very quickly of having enough shelter beds to be able to enforce the Martin v. Boise laws. Or your city will, if your city is the last to implement it, your city will be inundated.
So when you say shelter beds, would that be a shelter? Again, that's a sprung structure
Could be a
or
yeah, could be
okay,
a yeah. It
sprung
doesn't have
structure.
to
Okay,
have a traditional roof.
okay, okay. Um, any final thoughts?
No, I think that we have the capability to do it. I did some quick math, and with the 10,000 folks, if they each had a 12 by 12 space and they were given a tent and a cot, and we had the sprung structure, and we already had the concrete and the
Mhm.
water supply and the electricity, I think that we could get it down to about $5,000 per person. And then another $5,000 per person annually for the services and the cafeteria structure. So
Mhm.
it's just it's quick numbers, it's quick math, but we could do this. It's the 5,000 times 10,000 is big money, but it's nothing compared to 1.1 million times 10,000 plus services. And I
So a
think
lot.
that we have to look fiscally at what we can afford and how
Mhm.
quickly we can do this. If you and I decided to do this week, we could start this week.
Mhm.
We could do this.
And a lot of the cost, and there is a significant cost to leaving people on the street, the firefighters and the
Ah,
police and the paramedic cost of getting, so there's a significant cost there just leaving people on the street, in addition to the fires, like you said, the public health issues. So it's probably more expensive than a sprung structure.
you would,
Um, mhm, mhm.
yeah, I think
And
San
that's,
Jose had over 22,000 fires in the last 2 years at encampments.
yep,
22,000 fires.
yep, yep. Yeah, I do like the idea of sprung structures, and I'm gonna reach out to Las Vegas to learn more about it.
Okay.
Um, I hope more cities listen to your advice, and I'm glad well, I'm really fortunate and appreciate your time today. Um, and thank you. It was very informative.
Thank you so much. And feel free to Google incremental ladder of housing success.
Okay, and I'll post that when I post the video. Again,
Okay,
thank you.
perfect. All right. Thank you very much.